Hello, and welcome to Stories Sustain Us, the podcast where we explore inspiring stories of individuals who are making a meaningful impact on our world. I'm your host, Stephen Schauer, and today we have an extraordinary guest whose journey will truly captivate and inspire you. Joining us is Jordan Vexler, whose story begins in San Antonio, shaped by a deep sense of community. From her unique, self-designed major at Rice University to her transformative experiences in Latin America, Jordan has cultivated a passion for social justice and sustainability that drives her work today. In this inspiring episode, we'll explore how Jordan's innovative approaches to community development, consumer financial education at Texas Appleseed, and the complexities of the rose industry in Ecuador highlight the importance of cultural sensitivity and simple solutions in fostering sustainable communities. We'll also delve into her family's legacy in metal recycling, a critical yet often overlooked component of sustainability. Jordan will share how community engagement, advanced technology, and the circular economy play crucial roles in reducing carbon emissions, saving energy, and shaping a more sustainable future. Let me tell you a little bit more about Jordan, and then we'll jump into this interview. Jordan Vexler is the Chief Operating Officer of Monterrey Metal Recycling Solutions in San Antonio, Texas. She is an active member both regionally and nationally in the recycling industry's trade organization, REMA, and she champions industry modernization and advances to promote safe, economically sustainable, and environmentally responsible practices. Fluent in Spanish, Jordan holds a bachelor's degree of the development of modern Latin America from Rice University and a Master of Social Policy degree from the London School of Economics. Jordan is passionate about educating the public on the critical role metal recycling plays in protecting the Earth's atmosphere and preserving its finite resources. She advocates for greater awareness of how metal recycling contributes to the circular economy, where metals are reused and repurposed to minimize waste and environmental impact. Her efforts aim to inspire individuals and businesses alike to see recycling as a vital component of global sustainability. Since joining Monterrey Metal Recycling Solutions, a fourth-generation family-owned business founded by her great-grandfather in 1916, Jordan has implemented significant changes to further enhance the company's commitment to operating an environmentally responsible, state-of-the-art metal recycling facility. Now, get ready to be inspired by Jordan's unwavering commitment to making a positive impact and her insights into how we can all contribute to a more sustainable world. Here on Stories Sustain Us, where we are inspiring action through the power of storytelling. All right, well, welcome, Jordan. Welcome to Stories Sustain Us. How are you today?
Hi, good morning, Stephen. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm doing well. You're kind of back in my old stomping ground, San Antonio, so it's good to connect with you there. So I appreciate you taking time to speak with me this morning.
Well, likewise. I have the Riverwalk right behind me,
You do?
which you've had a huge impact on in your career. So I thank you for that and everything that you've done for San Antonio. I enjoy it every day, and so many of us do.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. It was a privilege and an honor to be a part of such a great team working on such important projects there in San Antonio. I'm glad you and others are enjoying it. So it was an honor of a lifetime to be part of all that. So
it's a transformation of our city and a true legacy project that it has, it's transformative to our city and the connectivity of our city, and our understanding of our waterways, and the foundation that you and the team surrounding you at the time laid is still developing out into the west side, and it's just a truly impressive legacy that you and the team around you laid.
Oh, Thank you so much, Jordan. That warms my heart to hear that. Thank you for that kind compliment and goodness, let's talk about you though. That's why we're here. So you're making me get all red and blushy. So let's make you get red and blushy. So, you know the format. We're going to eventually jump into your work, which I'm very excited to talk about. The work of Monterrey Metal Recycling and this longtime family legacy of a great business in San Antonio. But you yourself have an amazing story that I want to know more about too. So tell me about your upbringing and how did you get, from the very beginnings to now being a generational leader of this business in San Antonio? What's your story?
Well, my story, as you know, as is the case with so many people, I didn't know I was going to land here. Um, I I grew up in San Antonio, born and raised, and you know, like many teenagers and 20-year-olds, I thought I'm never coming back to San Antonio. Of course, at the time, we didn't have the transformation yet in place that really I think the Riverwalk and River North, all of that project
Yeah.
did to change our city.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's a part of why it's attractive to come back
Oh,
as
nice.
as an adult.
Yeah.
So sorry I'm coming back to you
No,
again,
no, no. You're not.
but
You're coming back to the river and all the amazing connectivity that brings to the community. So that's
truly,
it's important, and I think that's an important message that people can take from that. That rivers that were once forgotten parts of our urban communities can be revitalized and become this great reason to be in a city. So thank you for that
yeah,
connection to that.
it really is. I can tell you that my children and I spend a good percentage of our weekends interacting with the river in some way.
Nice,
Um,
nice.
so yes, so here I am back in San Antonio, but in the metal recycling business,
Yeah,
um, not where I thought I was going to go. I was focused in I attended Rice University and studied. Actually, found my way to to the end of my sophomore year,
yeah,
and realized that I couldn't create a major out of what I had studied.
yeah.
Um,
What
I
were you
was so
studying?
excited. Well, I was studying everything that I was
Just
interested
everything.
in.
Yeah, yeah, nice. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I took some civil engineering courses and some, you know, mathematics and political science and history and language courses, and it was so fun. Um, and and then I realized, yeah, there was no way to create a single major out of everything that I picked from.
Yeah,
Um, in which case, I realized I really needed to go through and figure out a way to graduate in 4 years.
yeah.
And it, you don't often read the handbook, the entire handbook of your university, and I
Yeah, I didn't know
resorted
there
to
was
that.
one.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know you had to pick a major, and obviously I hadn't read the handbook. Um,
Yeah.
but in reading the handbook, I found this clause that you could make your own major.
Oh, right on.
Um, and so it had not been done, I think, in 20 years. So there was no institutional knowledge of how to do it. Um, but I succeeded, and I actually graduated with a degree in development of modern Latin America.
Right on. So tell
So,
me, why?
mhm.
What was the impetus of that? Like, how did you piece all these together to come up with that as a focal point? That sounds fascinating.
So when I was 15, growing up in San Antonio, being bilingual
Mm-hmm.
is so important.
Sure.
And while I spoke a bit of Spanish, I knew I wasn't fluent enough.
Yeah.
And so when I was 15, I decided to really throw myself into that. And I actually went to Guatemala um, for uh, a part of the summer,
Yeah.
and it was during social upheaval,
Yeah.
and and I became really passionate about
Wow.
the plight of Latin American countries, and the interaction of the United States, particularly with Central America
Sure.
at the time, and so I just the aspects of poverty reduction and um, the sensitivities around development and aid work, um, all of those things became very um, compelling to me.
Yeah.
And so, um, tying, that's why I thought that, civil engineering was so interesting. And of course, political history, political science, and of course, language all came together to form um, that major. And I spent a lot of time studying in Latin America, traveling Latin America.
Nice.
Um, yes,
Central
I
and South America, or did you stay mostly in the central Guatemala, El Salvador area, or did you really kind of go wide, far and wide?
I did. I went far and wide. Central
Nice.
America was certainly my first soiree, and really developed my passion um,
Yeah.
for indigenous culture and
Nice.
um, colonization.
Yeah.
And
That's a thing.
yes, it is. um, and it's a thing as well into South America.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, um, while I did a lot of traveling, I guess, for exploration and adventure,
Sure.
um, I did academic traveling to, let's see, to Cuba. I did a whole month in Cuba, where, let's see, that was in 2001.
Pre or
So
post 9/11, or earlier?
it was pre,
Just before. Okay. Wow. Yeah.
just before.
Yeah.
Um, so I probably would not have been able to
Right.
go.
That's what I was wondering. Like, wow, when did that happen? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was I thought your question would be, was it pre or post Castro?
Oh, also
Raul.
good question. Yeah, yeah. That's probably a more valid question. Which I'm forgetting when Castro passed. When?
It was Raul.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And that was just an incredible experience, especially through a lens of poverty reduction and community
Sure.
development.
Sure.
You see access to education. There's at that time there was some level of access to nutrition, um, it- but really at the end of the day, the main thing that I found was lacking was freedom choice.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you don't have freedom of choice, there's a real lack of quality in life.
Yeah.
So I found that a very interesting perspective,
Powerful.
it was very powerful, because as an American, um, that was a very new concept to me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So this was
uh,
all in your college years while you were at Rice, or yeah,
yes,
that's a lot of growth in those years. It sounds like.
yes,
Yeah.
it was so wonderful. From Cuba, I then went to Bolivia and spent a semester in Bolivia, and actually that's when 9/11 occurred.
Okay. Yeah.
I was in Bolivia. I remember that moment,
Sure.
of course, distinctly. We all remember exactly where we were, don't
Yeah.
we?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
in Bolivia was such a beautiful country, and it is still, or at the time, it was still so tied to indigenous culture and
Yeah.
indigenous centric politics.
Yeah.
And we had an impressive experience there, and learned a bit of Quechua. Um, Certainly not enough, only enough to embarrass myself, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sure appreciated by the indigenous cultures, nevertheless, that you were learning the language, not just, you know, as is often the case with folks from the states. We go around the world and think everybody should just speak English, but it's, you know, whenever I travel to foreign countries, it's you know, try and at least learn the pleasantries so I can be appropriate and understand the culture and the language that I'm visiting, as opposed to being the quote unquote ugly American. So I get it. I get it. That's great. So from Rice, if I understand your background, then you in all of these amazing trips, it sounds like, in Latin America, you found yourself, I think, in London. Is that the next step of your trip, or am I jumping
Um,
ahead?
you're jumping a little bit ahead.
Oh, so please fill in the gap.
I went from Houston to Austin,
Okay.
where I started working for Texas Appleseed.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Tell me more about that.
So Texas Appleseed is part of a social justice network of, at the time, I believe 15 states, state-based centers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's focused on, uh, it's a social justice not-for-profit
Yeah.
that advocates for poverty reduction and consumer transparency and immigrant rights.
Okay.
So, amongst others,
Yeah. Yeah.
other topics.
Yeah.
So yes, at the time, I really focused on access to consumer beneficial financial products. Um, so, while there could be some low income products
Mm-hmm.
in the marketplace, they oftentimes occurred huge fees that were quite hidden. And unless you were a very educated consumer of financial goods or
Sure.
user,
Sure.
um, you were probably in a less beneficial situation by using those accounts than you would be by maybe having your cash in your pocket or under your bed.
Sure. Sure.
And
Talking
so
about like payday
we
loan things and different kind of high interest uh, loan cash advance programs and things like that, or
absolutely,
yeah,
but even
yeah,
even if you had a savings account, um, that you had an ATM card
mm-hmm,
on, you know, even using your own bank
yeah, the
ATMs,
banking
you could
fees,
incur, yes,
yeah,
$5 per transaction, or
yeah, yeah,
um, and and all of this was, I think this was probably at the cusp um, of of these accounts being required, um, and and so what we offered was a voice to advocate for transparent and beneficial products.
yeah, nice,
And so we worked with a lot of credit unions and a lot of actually big, national financial institutions, banks.
yeah,
Um, and it was wonderful. We had some great success, and it was really well received. And of course, then came the financial education piece that
yeah,
community partners uh, worked really hard to roll out. That's actually still, I mean, it's still a huge passion for me,
nice,
and I've been able to carry that into my current job at Monterrey Iron, and in making sure that everybody has access to a financial institution. But we can
nice.
go into that later.
Yeah, yeah. So what's the next step then from Appleseed? Is yeah,
So I was just so fulfilled by the work,
yeah,
and most of my colleagues at Texas Appleseed and throughout the Appleseed network were, had a policy masters, which I
yeah.
believe you do from LBJ.
I do, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
my first boss at Texas Appleseed, also graduated from LBJ,
yeah,
um, and um, with the continuing the itch to travel, I um, and I have to be honest, and also a 1 year program that didn't require GRE or a G, is it GRE, right?
Yeah,
Or
the GRE. Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes, it
yeah.
didn't require the GRE.
A graduate
Um,
something. I don't even know what it stands for, but it was you needed to take it. You needed to take the
yes.
test. So.
Um, and I found that the London School of Economics had a program that I, um, was super interested in, social policy and planning in
Nice.
developing countries. So
Sounds
they've
very
since
aligned.
shortened.
Yeah,
Yes, they've
yeah,
since shortened the name,
yeah.
but yeah. So I did the hardest year probably of my life, and the reason for maybe still academic nightmares. But it was a wonderful experience,
Yeah,
and I was surrounded um, by peers from all over the world,
yeah.
um,
I'm sure.
and and again, that perspective um, really empowered me to, I guess, feel more exposed to more perspective and more perspectives from different cultural
Yeah,
perspectives and different socioeconomic and historic backgrounds.
yeah.
And
That's so important. That exposure to other cultures and other backgrounds and that's such an important thing that I think many people miss out on. And so yeah, kudos to you for jumping on that opportunity. I mean, what a great way to expand your mind and your life.
well, it's a real, I think from an American perspective, it's very hard to understand the complexity of the layers of civil strife or
Sure.
poverty or you know uh, um, the developmental state
Yeah.
of different countries and communities.
Yeah.
And so I really approached it with a lot of sensitivity,
Yeah.
um, to try to understand as opposed to what the American style had been, and perhaps has been, continues to be, is sort of it, superimposing
Yeah.
a,
Let it
a model and a judgment.
let us tell you how to do it right.
Hmm.
As opposed to learning what might work best for you and in your culture and in your community. Yeah. Yeah,
Exactly.
that is still sadly probably a predominant American model of how we conduct not only probably foreign relations, but how we probably still run things in a lot of our federal, state, and local governments. Of let us tell you how to do it, as opposed to getting in with the communities and listening and trying to be of service, as opposed to just let's tell you how to do it right. Right, whatever you know whoever's in charge thinks that means. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
I appreciate your perspective on that. I think that's another really significant way of looking at the world, of listening and learning from others and working with, as opposed to trying to dictate to. That's a great perspective, I think.
Well, again, I mean, I think the Cuban experience of the freedom to choose.
Yeah,
Um, if you don't have voice, the trajectory from there is it's a downward trajectory.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so true. So a hard year in London, but an enjoyable year, I think, is what I heard you say and took away from that experience. Um, from there, did you come back to San Antonio, or were there other steps along the way before you got back into the family business?
There's still some jumps around. I
Okay.
actually so I decided to go to the London School of Economics,
Mm-hmm.
and then once I was accepted, I realized I needed to go live and work in in this setting of community development,
Yeah.
um, before I went to the LSE.
Okay.
So at that point, I moved to Ecuador and I started
Okay.
working for an organization called CMUS, and it was a dual program organization, I should say, that on one hand it funded the community development work that they did by um, bringing in students from Washington State University, I believe,
Yeah.
um, to become familiar with health practices,
Mm-hmm.
so non-Western health practices, um, and ideas of community development. Um, so really, a true extension of my belief system,
Yeah.
and my education. Um, so yeah, so that was my first exposure to CMS, and in that exposure, I was working more on the community development side, and assisting them on some of their projects. I found it really interesting that one of the best inputs to health outcome in the rural districts was to establish addresses.
Mm. Yeah.
Now you think about it, you can, everybody had thought we need to fund an ambulance. This, rural district needs an ambulance. So they all had ambulances. They had, emergency services, but the emergency services were only as good as they
Yeah.
could get to the
Where do you go?
location they needed to be.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
we'll turn at the house that has the red door, and not that red door, the one that has two pigs out front.
Right.
And
Right. Yeah. Something
yes,
so simple, but so important. Wow. That's a great insight. That's a great
yes.
insight. Yeah.
So that was a project that I assisted them with, and again, what a reality check
Yeah.
that um, that having an address can save a life.
Yeah.
Um, you can have an ambulance, you can have the professionals, but if you don't have an address, the likelihood that they're going to be able to help you
Yeah.
is
Where to go? Yeah. No,
yeah,
that is, again, probably coming from your upbringing in San Antonio. Just, I guess my imagination is who doesn't grow up with an address? Who, those maybe Western benefits that we have experienced at other parts of the world may not have. To kind of come to that conclusion was, I imagine, a bit eye opening. At least the story that's happening in my head about that is like a wow moment of this is such a, a fundamental thing for someone to have a home, a place that can be identified so that
hmm
emergency services can go help you when needed. I mean, that seems something we may take for granted, at least in my upbringing. Yeah.
it definitely is.
Yeah.
Um, and so my experience with CMUS and working in these rural areas with them actually led to my master's degree uh, dissertation. And so I wrote on the rose industry, the
Okay.
cut flower industry,
Okay.
primarily roses in
Yeah.
Ecuador. Um, so the rose industry was thought of as a great rural economic development project, and it was invested quite heavily in, to be transformative
Yeah.
for the rural areas. Um, and interestingly, because there's not much of a cash economy
Sure.
in these rural areas, and certainly women were domestic producers.
Sure.
Um, Again, not non-cash driven,
Mm-hmm.
but well, so as the rose industry developed and was very successful in Ecuador, um, they primarily think it's 90, over 90% women employed. And and we saw the transformation of these rural areas. And it's you know, again, an impact that you maybe wouldn't expect coming from our perspective.
Yeah.
Women were earning money for their first time.
Sure.
Um, and you would think, I mean, one might think that that would be a straight trajectory to success for all of these families. Well, in fact, it was a much more mixed outcome than that.
Yeah.
There, you know, you had 18 wheelers hauling across the country and spreading the AIDS epidemic through the
Oh,
country.
wow. Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
you had women working with chemicals and coming home. Uh, you know, the practice is not to shower every day. Um, Coming home with such chemicals and breastfeeding,
And
for
sharing, yeah,
example,
spreading. Yeah,
and
yeah.
and and so
Wow. Yeah.
there was some infant mortality impacts,
Yeah.
um, and and there was nutritional impacts overall because women were so important to the you know the production of their you know
Their
self-sustainability in
food.
food
Sure.
and
Sure.
everything.
Yeah.
And so bringing water, you know, back to the house, all of these things just all of a sudden crumbled, and the
Wow.
older generations weren't able to keep up. So you know, grandfather and you know grandfather and great grandfather, grandmother and great grandmother weren't able to provide what these young women who were now employed outside the household for
Yeah.
12 hours a day
Yeah.
could do.
Wow.
So, you know, just
Yeah.
again, a
All these
really
unintended
interesting
consequences.
perspective.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Um, so that's what I majored in. And then I returned to Ecuador, worked for CMAS again. And then after having received my master's, I was teaching the students from Washington State. And that was just an incredible experience,
Yeah.
to share my passion and travel all over Ecuador, you know, visiting with shamans, visiting with completely different models of healthcare delivery, um, and and seeing just how effective these non-Western models could really be.
Yeah. That's incredible. You're just your journey is. I could keep talking and diving deeper into all of these facets of sustainability because that's everything you've been talking about. Are these economic and social and environmental justice aspects that all come together in the concept of sustainability? It's not just climate change and clean air. It's all of these other human factors that if we can't come together and figure out how we can have more sustainable economics and how we can have more social justice in the world and equity and all of these other things that aren't often top of mind when the word sustainability comes into the topic. Your whole life journey has been about sustainability, and then you then eventually come back to the family business, which is also about sustainability, just a different aspect of that. So tell me.
I yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that just as you said, I mean, sustainability is a cross section of so many qualities, um, because without all of them, which then also makes reaching um, this ideal place maybe terribly complex to get to.
Yeah. It is. I mean, if but it takes people like you doing the hard work. That's why I love this show. Is I get to talk to amazing people like yourself that have rolled up your sleeves and said, let's tackle these hard problems to make the world a better place. So, thank you for all of the experiences that led you to eventually come back to the family business. Because I mean, I'm impressed by every step of your journey. Has been a way of trying to make the world a better place, and I'm grateful for that, and I appreciate you for those efforts. So thank you for that.
Well, and I thank you for what you've done with River Authority here in San Antonio.
Well, thank you as well. Now let's jump into the family business. Want to make sure we're given some adequate time to that as well, because that's an important story. So you are now the fourth generation leading a family-owned business that was started by, was it your grandfather, I believe?
My great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather, yeah. Well, that'd be the fourth generation. Yeah, missed the math there in my head. So tell me about the founding of the business and what it is, and then let's transition after that into what it is you're doing there to keep this business modernized and making the city of San Antonio a better place.
Um, well, thank you for that transition. The story is remarkable. My great grandfather immigrated from Eastern Europe, and thought he boarded a ship thinking that he was coming to America, and he ended up in Canada.
Oh,
So he ended up having a Canadian passport,
mm-hmm.
and that fact becomes very, very important in his life. So he eventually moved down to Texas, and then started going between San Antonio, Texas, and Monterrey, Mexico,
Okay.
picking up discards along the way and trading them in each city. If you can imagine, with a horse and buggy. And he was gathering, metal, at the time, bones, rags, all of these things had value
Everything had a reuse value, yeah.
in 1895, 96.
Yeah.
So, so this was also during civil war, I guess, a war in Mexico, and Pancho Villa stopped the train that my great grandfather was on, and as the story goes, everybody was loaded off the train, and all of the Americans were shot.
Wow.
But because my great grandfather had a Canadian passport, he lived.
Yeah.
And so here I am.
So here you are. Yeah. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he ended up settling down in San Antonio, founding our company here in San Antonio on the near west side of downtown initially. Mm-hmm. And I had been, my father worked, my grandfather, my father, now me, and my brothers, all worked together there. I had been working between Ecuador and coming to Monterrey Metal Recycling Solutions. I had been working in Appleseed again at the national policy level. And I just came to realize that I came to realize when a policy was enacted or adopted, that we had pushed for this legislation so hard, and it was the best success of my life, of my policy life. And I looked around, and all my colleagues were so happy, and they were thrilled. And I felt like, oh man, there should have been more. We should have gotten more. Mm-hmm. And I realized that the policy world was not going to be happiness generating for me.
There would always be a kind of that missing puzzle piece of never enough. Policy. I get that.
Yes.
Even in the biggest wins, I can relate to that feeling you've described in some of the policy victories I've been a part of in my life. There's always the celebration tempered by the, oh, well, we didn't solve it all. So there's, right. right,
Yes,
right.
exactly. And I want to solve it all.
Sure.
Sort of a person, and so I found and I was very thankful to recognize that you can't be that's not a sustainable
Hmm.
um, way to live a professional
Yeah, no,
career.
on a personal level, right? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
So it was at a wonderful moment when my grandfather and my father were working together. My grandfather would have been in his 90s at the time, and I felt like it was a wonderful time to take advantage of exposing myself at least to the family business.
yeah,
Um, my dad had asked me pretty much every single day of my life
yeah.
to please come work with him.
When are you coming home?
And
Yeah,
yes, absolutely. When are you coming home and when are you going to work with me?
yeah,
We would work so well together.
yeah.
And, I I still had the eye roll through my through my 20s. And then I said, "You know what? I'm going to try this for a year." I had not grown up with much exposure to the metal recycling facility.
Yeah.
And so it was a whole new thing. But as you've pointed out, and what I found in that first year is that I could really satisfy so many of those interests and passions
Yeah.
through being an employer, and particularly an employer in the recycling sphere.
Yeah. Nice.
So, yeah,
So tell me a bit about the work that your business does. I imagine most folks listening to this or watching this have some, probably good degree of understanding of recycling of plastics. I mean, that's, something that's talked about. The good and the bad of that is probably well known in paper, and in, that's certainly, we see the recycling symbol on the, plastic bottle that we bought at the store, or on the paper package that, tells us the paper's been, reused to make this cardboard or whatnot. But, metal recycling may not be as top of mind for people. So explain what your business does, and maybe shoot through some of the mythologies about it, the pro and con about the work that you do these days now.
yeah. Well, it's a really great way to introduce the topic because, interestingly enough, metal recycling does not have that little symbol.
Right.
Um, the metal that we interact with every day is, probably 60% of the metal we interact with is recycled. Your aluminum can that you pick up today, 60 days ago, was somebody else's aluminum can.
Yeah.
And 99% of it transferred over. Um, but I like to first point out to people what is metal around them.
Yeah.
So, I'm in a conference room right now, and I see the 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 lighting in here is all metal. The window frames are all metal. The chair I'm sitting in is metal. The table has a metal frame, and there is metal inside of the flooring and the walls all around me.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's the primary uh, volume and mass of this space. And when you drive on the highway, I challenge people to just go through their commute one day and recognize how much metal they're interacting with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I think that really surprises people. Um, so from that departure point, metal reaches its end of life, just like any product. And similarly to a plastic bottle being consumed, um, metal needs to be gathered and processed.
Yeah.
Now, most of the metal products that are obsolete or have met their end of life are way too large to be collected in our metal bins and or in our recycling bins in our alleyways or by our municipal solid waste.
Yeah.
And so um, we are the original recyclers. This concept of metal recycling, like I said, came about in the 1800s, and um, and so we created a value stream back over 100 years ago
Yeah.
to making sure that metal is driven back into the circular cycle of consumer goods.
Yeah. Well, I love what you just said. You were the original recyclers. I mean, that's like a brand tag you should just hold on to, because it's true. And again, I think it's eye opening to most folks who, because it isn't talked about as much and as um, as top of mind for everybody, because it isn't, like you said, something that I've got a bin in my house that I put plastic and paper and glass in, and then I got a bin, a very large bin outside of our place that will accept that, and once a week somebody will come and do something with it. But the metal you're talking about is end of life through demolition of a building, maybe, or a vehicle, or these larger items that someone isn't necessarily coming to pick up from my home or apartment. So am I telling that story correctly?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, the metal recycling or the metal that ends up um, in residential recycling bins
Mm-hmm.
does end up at a metal recycling entity
Get
like
separated
ours
and sent there, right?
th throughout the country.
Great.
So so while it just takes another step to get
Yeah.
to us and back into the metal stream. Um, so from us, and I guess the other way that metal is generated is through the manufacturing process.
Mm-hmm.
So the 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 waste pieces that are cut, perhaps, or the off-spec pieces, that's also a large generator of metal for recycling. So metal comes into our facility from all of these sources, and we what we do is we demanufacture. So
Tell me
our
about that.
process,
Explain that. Yeah.
yeah, so our process, we definitely are a manufacturer. Every single piece of material as it enters our facility, it has a predetermined process and a way for it to be demanufactured, um, so that at the end of its process, it is now a raw commodity.
Yeah.
And we can ship from our facility directly to like a steel mill or an aluminum foundry
Yeah.
that's making a brand new product of what has just flowed into our facility.
So that what you mentioned it earlier, the term, but what you're describing really is this sustainable circular economy idea that you're part of that process of making sure that these items that have value for other products yet to be created, you're making sure that doesn't end up in a landfill, and that it re-enters the stream of use, that and I imagine many times that the metal has the ability to go through different iterations and be recycled and demanufactured and brought back to its initial component, and then resold to a steel mill or an aluminum producing company, and this keeps that circle going. So
It
again, correct me
does.
if I'm off base, but that's what I'm hearing you describe, and that's such an important thing that our world needs more of, not just in metal, but in as many products as we can do that in.
Absolutely. And metal, so 40% of new steel in America is made from recycled steel. 99% of an aluminum can goes into the next aluminum can. the recyclability of metal is the conversion rate is huge. Um, Now, when you look at other materials, those conversion rates are much lower.
Sure,
So,
sure.
I
That's
love,
value.
I really take pride in being, interacting with a material that is so easily circular.
Yeah.
Um, and in recycling, we then reduce tons of carbon emissions
Yeah, I was
that
going to
would
ask you
have to
about that.
do
That there's
with
a
the mining.
yeah, that's where it comes from. I
Yes.
was like, there's got to be a carbon footprint reduction in this process. So yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, let's see. Producing new steel from recycled metals is 60% less energy, and it reduces carbon emissions 58%.
Yeah.
I have to read that fact. I mean, that's incredible. Now, this one also just blows my mind. The recycling of steel from automobiles alone saves the equivalent energy necessary to power 18 million homes every year.
No kidding. That's amazing. That
Yes,
that's eye opening. Wow.
it is.
Yeah.
And also, when we talk about rehoming of manufacturing,
Yeah.
um, and you know, bringing that economy or economic production back to our cities,
Yeah.
back to the United States, you know, the production of new steel, new metals in the United States is certainly, a part of that process.
Sure. Well, and just the employment process as well that you your company is bringing to the San Antonio communities. You're part of that process and everything as well. So this is all good news story that I'm so grateful that our mutual friend Leslie, put us in touch so you could come on and tell this story. So, um, a, a question I wanted to ask you about, as we're into the work that you're doing is I understand, from Leslie tipped me off on a little bit of a few things, which I appreciate. But how have you adapted to meet, um, environmental and community needs? Because I can imagine over the century plus, that your family business has been operating, there's been changes in, how do we look at the environment? How do we take care of our community that we're in to make sure that the demanufacturing that you're doing is contained and healthy for the community that you're living in as well. So how have you adapted and grown over the years to not only provide this amazing service, but do it in a really positive way for the community?
Yes. Um, well, my family is now four generations in San Antonio. So, our community has always been at the forefront of of our ethic, I suppose.
Sure.
So reinvesting in our community and supporting organizations all around us, um, like I said, is been a huge focus of our company, but also our personal time. Um, that said, you know, adapting to to process metal has a whole lot to do with the metal that you receive and the way that it is received, I
Mm-hmm.
suppose. And that, backing up another step, has to do with the way that our consumer goods are designed.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And, you know, unfortunately, our consumer goods are not designed for recycling or for their end of life, being, having the end of life in mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
So um, that's something that I advocate for, and wish that there was more advocacy for that. Um, so that said, a lot of metal is not easily demanufactured or deconstructed.
Yeah.
if you think of appliances in our household or our vehicles, they all have, I don't know, they have multiple kinds of metal and other non-metallic
Sure.
um, uh, materials. And so, you can't melt different metals together and come out with a product.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And yes, and so you come out with a sludge. Um, and so the most important thing about recycling properly is the separation of all of those different metals. So we have been able to invest in the development of a lot of technology to be able to sort all of that metal into its own category, and again, be able to return all of those metals to to a raw material that can go direct to a consumer.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a very impressive process to people. Um, and interestingly, fun fact is that the metal or the technology used in our industry is similarly used in the foods manufacturing industries.
Tell me more about
Because,
that. Yeah.
well, um, most of the equipment used to produce food is metal,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
and so all of their QCing processes try to
Yeah.
find
Quality
any
control for somebody who doesn't know what QC means, right?
yes,
Yep.
any of
Just
their quality control methods
yeah.
um, or are looking for any trace metal goods, or metal in
In
their food
the food, right?
product.
They're looking
Yes,
for it to make sure it doesn't get in the final product that's shipped out, because you don't want to bite into whatever you're eating and find a little piece of metal. That same technology then is what you can use to look for it, to separate it and put it back into the recycling stream.
exactly.
That's
They're recovering it.
that's wonderful.
We're recovering it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And and of course the scale is very different.
Sure.
Their equipment is like this and ours is like this.
Sure.
But it is similar.
That makes a lot
Or
of sense.
it's the exact same.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of
Yes.
sense. Wow. Yeah.
Um
Another tie
and
I wouldn't have known about or seen, but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
yes, that's why you don't bite into the paddle of their blender, of
Yeah.
their industrial blender every now and
Thankfully. Yeah.
then. Yes, yes. Um, so yeah, and another thing is we use a lot of magnets and a lot of different kind of magnets.
Mm-hmm.
We use permanent magnets and we
Makes
use
sense.
electromagnetic magnets, and we use a thing called an eddy current. Now, I think most of us are really familiar with magnets that attract steel, um, and that's why it will stick to our magnetic refrigerator.
Yeah.
Um, but you know what? Some stainless steel is non-magnetic. That's the
Yeah.
higher quality,
Yeah.
and you cannot stick a magnet to some higher quality stainless steel refrigerators.
Yes.
But anyhow, I digress. We know about those kind of magnets, and then there is an eddy current, a magnet that produces a certain current called an
Mm-hmm.
eddy current that actually throws aluminum.
Pushes it away. Yeah.
Yes,
Repels it.
yes,
Okay. Yeah.
it repels it.
Yeah.
And so this is a way that
Helps
we then
sorting.
can recover the
Yeah.
aluminum from your vehicle or your appliance, for example.
Yeah.
And then we have induction sensor sorters that look for any metal residuals. And so when we start with a car, the scale of a car very easily,
Yeah.
within less than a minute, we're able to shred the car to fist size and down.
Jeez.
And then within another few minutes, we're recovering down to
All those pieces.
yes,
Wow.
yeah, Yeah.
Wow.
It's it's so we're recovering. I mean, that's really our focus, is always trying to recover more
Yeah.
in order to get better efficiency into the circular
Yeah.
economy.
And
Um,
I'm imagining now, hearing the speed at which you can shrink a car. My goodness, I imagine the people that work for you and with you, safety has to be top of mind every day of every moment, because the equipment that's shredding a car that fast is not something that a human wants to interact with in any way. So I imagine safety is a paramount of
oh,
everything that
absolutely.
you have to do. I mean, that makes obvious sense, but just imagine the scale of the machinery you're working with. Is that something that you and your team around you has just got to make sure that everybody is always safety. So that
Oh,
sounds,
I mean, it
yeah,
has to be front of mind. I mean, there's no reason to do what we're doing if we're not going home to our families.
yeah, 100%,
And so,
right,
you know, we have a very strong safety culture, and taking care of one another in a broader sense. And from a financial
yeah. You
perspective, from
mentioned the
a
financial
health
education
perspective.
and literacy and everything. Yeah, so that's
Yeah,
holistically looking at your employees, not just as generating revenue for your business, but looking at them as humans, and how can you take care of them and you know make sure that their life is improved by working for you. So that's
yes.
wonderful. Yeah,
Well, again, I mean, being empowered, um, being content, are really valuable things in life.
yeah,
And, if you don't have financial stability, you can't be a good employee.
yeah, yeah,
You're distracted. You're probably missing work a lot because you're hopping from apartment to apartment.
yeah,
You know, there needs to be stability, and to the degree that we are able to help those who haven't been able to find stability access it, um, we do our best to try to do that.
yeah,
Um, and so safety is front of mind, and I think a whole lot of people think that what we're doing is primarily hands on. Now, there are very few people that come into a physical interaction with
sure,
metal at our facility. Um, I like to say most of my colleagues are sitting behind a computer, and that's not just my colleagues in the office. It's my colleagues that are in the crane, or operating the shredder, or operating the shears, the pieces of equipment that are actually
sure,
demanufacturing and processing.
sure,
They're looking at very technologically advanced controls systems, and monitoring how conveyors are running, and everything is working together properly. We work with engineers. We have electrical engineers on staff.
sure.
Um, it is it's not what was the show, a metal recycler way back in the day. Um, oh, I can't, sorry, I can't think of it. I
You,
shouldn't have brought it up, but
oh, it's okay. Now give me something to research later.
yeah, right. So it is a very technologically advanced. It is not haphazard.
Yeah,
Like I said, everything comes in. It has its predetermined way of being demanufactured into a raw commodity,
yeah,
and then we're shipping directly out to consumers on a constant basis. So we
yeah,
ship by rail and by truck, um, and the vast majority of our product um, is consumed in Mexico and the United States.
yeah. Nice. Well, Jordan, I know I want to do a little time check because we're at about an hour, and I could just keep diving into more and more of this because it's so fascinating, and I really appreciate how clearly you explain what is obviously complicated work that's happening in this demanufacturing process. I appreciate how you really made it easy to understand. So thank you for that. Um, Before we get into your call to action and your thoughts about hope, though, is there anything about the business that we haven't touched on yet that I want to make sure give you time to educate us and educate me? So I don't want to cut the conversation off, but I also do want to be respectful of your time today as well. So is there something that we missed that is worth making sure we understand?
Well, I guess I think something that I would point out is while it's not um, an attractive process, perhaps, um,
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
beauty's in the eye of the beholder. That's right. It is an incredibly beneficial
Yeah.
process to have in our communities. We can only be as carbon efficient as we are close to the source of the product, of the
Absolutely.
byproduct.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, um, and so being metal recyclers throughout the country are located in um, urban areas. Part of that is also derived from the fact that most of these companies were established so very long ago. And so they have a long history in our communities.
Yeah.
The other benefit, and tying to rivers, I like to point out that when we do river cleanups and picking up trash, you're not picking up metal. You
Yeah.
know, metals, because of the value stream that they have, they are not ending up in our creeks. It's not like mattresses on the side of the road,
Yeah.
because we have a predetermined place for these items to end up, and people to actually be paid for them.
Yeah.
So it's a really it does so much more for our communities than one can really imagine. Um, and we have to think, like, everything that we are recycling has has been in daily interaction with you, me, you know, and that's why I like to point out just how much metal we consume in a day,
Yeah. Yeah.
interact with,
Yeah.
and we're not throwing it in the trash.
I appreciate how you started the conversation about just describing the room you're in and how much metal there is, and as you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, there's a whole lot of metal in my room too. I mean, I again, those out of sight, out of mind things that I think this episode is going to help people open their eyes to and see that metal and the ability to have it part of the circular economy and be recycled and reused continuously is such a critical component of sustainability. And something else, as you were talking about locations in urban areas, part of what breaks down circular economies, as I understand it, is transportation costs. And can you get the materials to be reused and recycled, and can you export them to somebody else to use? So your location there, by highway and a rail line in an urban area, is where you need to be. It's where you get the source material, and then you have access to, at a relatively low cost, export the raw materials back into the system. To put a metal recycling place out in the middle of nowhere, so to speak, might diminish its circular economy benefits because it adds then to transportation costs and all those things. So all these different pieces come together, and you guys, by all accounts, are an amazing example of how to do it and how to do it well, and how to do it right. So thank you so much for coming on and educating me and
Well,
sharing your tremendous personal story, but your family's business story. I mean, I'm really grateful for your time today.
No, thank you. Thank you. It's I don't I don't often talk about myself. So and so it is I mean I am reminded on a daily basis that I get to do really my life's goal, my life's work every day. And me and my colleagues go home knowing that we've made a difference in the world
Yeah,
every day.
yeah,
And
that's so important.
like we say, it's for a better San Antonio, for a better world. And it's a wonderful pleasure, and it's a pleasure to work with my family, and it's a pleasure to work in this sphere.
Well, it's that rings true with everything how you've described it all. I mean, you just exude that you enjoy what you do, and that you know fundamentally it's making a difference to your community and to the planet. So thank you for that, Jordan. And
Thank you.
so now's the time of the show where you get to ask people or encourage people to do something. What now that someone's listened to this or watched this and hopefully are as inspired by it as I am, what do you want them to do? What's your call to action? Can they support your business or support whatever it is that you wish for them to go do now?
I'm certainly not on today to promote our company, but I definitely promote recycling. And I mentioned design for recycling, and I think that that has a real tie to our behavior as consumers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, my hope would be that consumers really are intentional about what they consume and how they consume it. And really, as consumers, we need to be the ones to demand safe products and products that can be reused, and really, try to focus on more recyclable products
Yeah.
that you know really in the long run will benefit our economy and our environment and and our society. That would be my hope.
Yeah. Use our power as a consumer wisely to pick the products that um, can be best for our use, obviously, but for then reuse afterwards. So that's a great call to action. I appreciate it, and I try to be conscious about my consuming, but it's always a great reminder that to be conscious about how you're participating in this process, because we are. It's not just the manufacturers and not just folks like you who are recycling, doing the deconstruction work, but it's all of us as consumers have a role to play. So that's a great
I
message.
absolutely. So when you purchase something, everything has an end of its life. And so I think challenging people to think, what does that end of life look like for this product? Could I make a better choice? I think just taking a split second to think of that
Yeah,
is helpful.
wonderful. Well, thank you for that call to action, Jordan. I will put your business contact, information on the show notes. Since you weren't, necessarily promoting your business, I want to promote it, so I'll make sure that people have access to it on the show notes and have a way to learn more about you as well and the great work that you're doing there in San Antonio. So, and now on to the hope questions. So I ask everybody the same three questions about hope, and this idea that hope is a vision for a better future and steps that can be taken to get there, and that we feel we have a sense of agency to accomplish it. Won't be without difficulty or challenges, and we might fail, right? But we have this vision and an idea how to get there, and a sense of agency that we can do something about it. So Jordan, I'll ask you three questions, and just give your your first reaction to it. You don't have to think too hard or long about it. Just what do you think? So, the first question is, what is your vision for a better future? It can be for you personally or professionally or for the world. Just what's your vision for a better future?
Hmm. Well, my vision for a better future, I think would have to be based on the complex understanding of outcomes. And, I think we've talked about that a whole lot today, is you can't just do one thing and expect a huge difference. And you certainly can't do anything in a vacuum. And so I think hope for the future would mean a whole lot more communication
Mm,
and a whole lot more understanding of the complexities um, of every community and of every problem, really.
yeah. So tell me a bit more about why that is your hope for a better future.
Well, I don't think that we can solve some of the problems that we are facing um, without without really trying to break down, um, like I said, the complexities. And there have to be multifaceted approaches. Um, it can't just be education. It can't just be jobs. It can't just be, our clean water. Um, because really, at the end of the day, if you look at any of those one issues in a community, they all are ultimately tied together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, final question, Jordan. Then, now imagine for a moment we're living in that future where people have a better understanding of the interconnectedness of our place and everything around us, and communication is flowing freer and smoother and clearer, and understanding of these complexities is more widely known amongst the populace. So, how does that make you feel that we're living in that future now?
Utopia, you know, we know it's not achievable, but whenever there's a level of improvement, um, you create a beneficial spiral
Yeah.
and a beneficial pattern. And so I think that whenever at the smallest level, you can produce some change that then affects change. And so, yeah, whether we're gonna get to utopia, not in my lifetime, um, but I think it's an ethic that we can all um, just live in a tiny way every day, and that can ultimately make a difference for
Yeah.
future generations.
Right on. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for taking time to join me today. I'm certainly going to do my part to take those daily steps to do my part to walk us together towards that utopia that I don't know that we'll get to it either, but it is absolutely the worthy goal of walking towards it together. So I'm going to keep doing my part as best I can, and I have no doubt you'll keep doing your part as well. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I've learned a lot from you today, and I'm very, very grateful for what you do for the San Antonio community and really the world, to make the world a better place. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and right back at you. I think your work in proselytizing sustainability through this podcast, and the diversity and breadth of your approach to sustainability and those who you interview is so interesting, and I think it does broaden the perspective on the issues at hand. And So thank you for that, and of course, thank you for your work with our rivers.
Yeah. Well, I'll get back to San Antonio later this year. I'm hoping to visit some folks. So I will hopefully see the river and probably at some point drive by your place of work as well. So I'll make sure
You are
and
welcome.
well, thank you. I'll let you know when I'm coming. I'd love to see what you do there. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
Uh,
you very much.
all right. Take care.
You too.
And that brings us to the end of another inspiring episode of Stories Sustain Us. A heartfelt thank you to Jordan Vexler for sharing her incredible journey with us today. From her roots in San Antonio to leading the family business, Monterrey Metal Recycling Solutions, Jordan's story is a testament to the power of legacy, sustainability, and social justice. We've explored the vital role of community development, the complexities of the recycling process, and the critical need for consumer engagement in fostering a more sustainable future. Jordan's insights into the circular economy and the immense energy savings from metal recycling remind us just how interconnected our actions are with the health of our planet. I want to thank Jordan for her passion and dedication to making a positive impact, which clearly shines through in everything she does. So thank you, Jordan, for inspiring us to think deeper about sustainability and the steps we can all take to contribute to a better future, including being more conscious of our own consumerism and demanding more thoughtful and meaningful sustainability from the producers of the products we buy. To you, the audience, thank you for joining me on this journey. If you've enjoyed this episode, as I always ask, please share it with your friends and family, leave me a review, and subscribe to Stories Sustain Us wherever you get your podcasts. On the next episode of Stories Sustain Us, join me for an insightful conversation about how nature-based solutions can be used to help mitigate stormwater pollution. You'll learn what nature-based solutions are and how they help improve water quality and habitats while also bringing a multitude of other community benefits. It's a fascinating conversation about the evolution of engineering practices away from outdated infrastructure concepts that are destructive to nature towards a new way of developing engineering solutions that work with and often can help restore nature while still providing us the infrastructure we need in our communities. You can catch the next episode of Stories Sustain Us on February 11th at storiessustainus.com, wherever you listen to podcasts, and on YouTube. Till next time, I'm Stephen Shower. Please take care of yourself and each other. Take care.